What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And I've spent some time in prison and in the streets. I've also been out of prison for 16 years. And so the content reflects that. Some of my experiences when I was younger, some of my experiences beyond the wall, but also my experiences being home, doing legal work to help people beat cases, immigration work, relationships, recovery, interviews with interesting folks from around, the country, and so on and so forth. So if that's the kind of content you're into, I encourage you to look around and subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications, all that good stuff. Everything is with the goal of helping others move in excellence, help ourselves at the same time. So this topic is one that actually a couple folks had asked me to speak on and lend voice to. To be clear up front, I'm not here advocating or speaking directly about any, either group's politics, right? I did my time as a Northerner and as a Norteño. I paroled in good standing with that label, but that was 2005, and I've been home ever since. And so I don't push any agenda besides the homie one, right? Helping others move in excellence. At the same time, got some familiarity of things going on. And so I thought I'd share my understanding and my experiences with you guys. When it comes to Northerners and Southerners and those that fall up under those broad terminologies and how they interact with people that have fallen out from the other side. I use the word dropout in the thumbnail. Technically speaking, the word dropout applies to those who have committed themselves to an organization above and beyond the general title of Northerner or Southerner from the streets, and then chose to debrief and leave that organization, telling all their friends and whatnot. So in this video, I'm using that term more loosely. It basically those that have fallen out of favor with the group that they originally came up out from, right? So maybe, dropouts, technically maybe just degenerates or whatever the term you want to use. And I don't say that with judgment towards those folks from either side, right? People make their own decisions. I'm in the streets. I'm a civilian. It is what it is. So for one, it depends on where you are, right? So in the general population, there are yards, or historically, things have changed a lot in prison, but, historically and in the 90s, there were yards that were general population yards, but where for Northerners, it was a no good yard, right? So it wasn't a PC yard. This is before 50-50 yards. It wasn't an SNY yard. It was a general population yard. But if you were a Northerner and you went to that yard and you stayed on that yard, you're going to have to answer for that. And most likely your career would be over whenever you encountered people elsewhere, right? When you left that place. Because folks weren't programming right. Maybe there was targets on that yard that were quote unquote poisoning people. Maybe there was other groups programming on the yard that Northerners weren't allowed to program with and they chose to. Anyways, it is what it is. It could be said that all the Northerners on that yard or all those that were labeled as Northerners were falling out of favor with the bigger umbrella. But other group segments programmed on that yard, right? You had general population Blacks, general population Whites, general population Southsiders, others, Paisas. And so it's not as if they targeted these quote unquote degenerates, right? For one, it's not up to any other group segment to really check the background of somebody that's not in their group. For those that have been around the system, they would recognize that things on that yard operate a little bit differently, but they may treat them a little different. They may try to take advantage of them a little more, oppress them a little bit more, because they view them as less than and not a real rival, so to speak, right? Not a real threat. Or they might just ignore them and program like normal. So that's one context in which those out of favor with one side really just do their thing and nobody else really cares. When I was in the SHU program, where you actually encounter, actual dropouts, right? From what I saw, it kind of varied. And so I've seen dropouts or people that were no longer in favor that were shunned by everybody in the section. When I was in the Bay, they're very small sections. And from any group segment, you come through and really nobody's messing with you. And because there it's viewed as, not that everybody's was on the same page, but all group segments that I noticed in the Bay, it tended to have respectful lines of communication between each other. They tended to get along with the folks that were around them. And, push comes to shove, of course, everybody's going to try to kill each other. But in the meantime, folks were being grown about it. But there was also a convict character that crosses, political or ethnic or geographic boundaries. And those that stepped away from the fold from any group were viewed as weaker and as not up to par and as untrustworthy. Not that necessarily people from another group were always trustworthy, but it's a little bit different. And so I've seen them get shunned by everybody, right? If you're no good with your own people, if your own people ain't messing with you, then we're not messing with you. I've also seen situations where there was a level of being cordial. The other side wouldn't go out of their way to aid somebody that had fallen out of favor with their own, but they wouldn't completely ignore them, right? They might say what's up to them. They might be, like I said, cordial with them. If they needed something passed, they would pass it, whatnot. Obviously, nobody's talking business with anybody, but they would respect them. I have seen on rare occasion, but where somebody who had fallen out of favor with their own made an effort to be embraced by what would have been a rival group. And that group somewhat embraced them, not embraced them to the point of defending them, not embraced them to the point of fully welcoming them into their circle, but basically strung them along. From best as I could tell, it was just sort of a game, and see what you can get out of them, see what you can learn, but not it didn't go so far as oh, I'm going to make you a proxy for me, right? Or we're going to put you to work for us type of deal. That person doesn't have access to the group that they fell out of favor with anyways. And so, and again, it's the untrustworthiness, right? It's the lack of character. Certain groups in prison aren't going to get along sometimes. Now there's the end of hostilities, things are different, but historically there's some groups that aren't going to get along. And it's going to be like that moving into the future, with some makeup. Who knows what those groups will be or what they'll look like. But it's always going to be the case in prison. But there's also a basic idea of character, understanding of character, and falling out of favor with your own puts you in bad, reflects badly on your character, even for those that don't know all the details or whatever. And that's the other thing is, you'll know if in a SHU program, you'll know if somebody's not in good standing because their own people won't acknowledge them. And when I was there, filters will go out, amongst us of, hey, this person's over here and this is their standing, right? They're from this group, but they're deemed on that end, so that we knew. So there's that. Now, what about the streets? The streets is a different ballgame, and some people that politic behind the wall don't politic in the streets. The North and South are very similar in a lot of ways, but some of those politics are a little bit different in how they play out. There's no real background checking other folks in the streets. And so you can't expect, let's say you see a Northerner and a Southerner doing business with each other, and you know that one of them is no good behind the wall. There's no way for the other person they're doing business with to also know that. I mean, it's highly unlikely. And probably as long as they're doing good business, they're going to keep doing business with them. Money talks at the end of the day with all these major institutional organizations. And so even if you do know, let's say like in the social media genre or whatever, people that have histories with different group segments will interact with each other. And some of those left their groups in good standing. Some of them are still linked in with their groups, and some of them are not linked in with their groups. And that may have happened in a variety of different ways, right? And I'm not casting judgment on anybody with any of those labels, but that's just the reality of the different kind of statuses that you'll find. So are those from, let's say from the South, are Southerners who are in good standing with their own people obligated or whatever to not mess with, let's say, Northerners that are not in good standing with their own people? No, not necessarily, right? And whether they know or they don't know. Now, I would suggest not doing illegal business with somebody who has cooperated with law enforcement, right? That's just sort of common sense. And that's across the board with any group segment or race or non-affiliated people or whatever. Just if you probably don't want to break the law with somebody that's answer the cops' questions when a law has been broken. But beyond that, just going out and having a beer, having some professional connection, having some public relationship, having some private interactions, knowing that what that person did put them in a bad light with their own, that's up to the individual. For one, group segments don't police one another, right? So Northerners don't get involved with Southerners' business or handle Southerners that have issues with other Southerners or whatnot. And the same is true for Southerners. They don't get involved in Northerner business or handle business that is the North, right? So you leave people to deal with their own kids, so to speak. And if you have a good connection, then cool. If you have a business connection, cool. If you choose not to mess with somebody because of what you heard about them, that's fine too. It's every man is making their own decision, right? Now, if it's politics at play, if you're operating on behalf of politics, prison politics, or even street and neighborhood politics, if you come from a neighborhood that does that seriously, then that's a different story. And it's up to the leadership that you fall up under whether or not they're going to let you engage in this business or engage in this connection. And I would say for both the North and the South, it's a case-by-case basis, right? And it depends on what's at stake. It depends on what the nature of the business is and what risks are there and what rewards are there. And at the end of the day, that's how it balances out. So this is a short video because it's not a very complicated subject. But, when people ask questions, then I try to address those. And I'm sure other people kind of wonder. And, especially in this YouTube genre, man, you can watch and you see different people from all over the country. And then you might hear something about them or there's a video and then how does this impact that? And how does that affect this? And how can this person with that person and blah, blah, blah. I mean, for one, if it doesn't involve your group, your best bet is just back up because it's not your business. If you're not personally affected by the decisions that other grown folks are making, then I wouldn't waste the mental energy on trying to determine if the moves that they're making are good moves or not. You make your moves based on what the person, it shows you, right? If you want to rock with somebody, rock with them. If you don't. And if you find somebody out about somebody or you see they're messing with somebody else and you don't like that or whatever, then turn off the channel or hang up the phone or whatever it may be. So that's just in general, kind of stay out of business that's not yours. But if you come from a place of just inquiry, hey, I wonder how this works, then hopefully this video helps explain some of that. And if you come from this culture, then there's a little clarity for you, from the best of my understanding. I've made this about North and South because those are the politics that I'm more familiar with. Obviously, I've never been a Southsider, so I'm not an expert on their politics. But uh, given the folks that I ran with, it's important for both sides to kind of understand where the other one's coming from. And I'm sure the same is true for Southerners. And so we kind of keep an eye. And in my life in the streets, there's some Southerners that I talk to and have good, personal relationships with, because we're not out here gang banging and we're not out here politicking. We're just out here being grown-ups. And also it's easier to talk about those two groups because their leadership is pretty cut and dry. When you talk about blacks and you talk about whites behind the wall, they're fractured to a large degree. Certain groups within the black car may fall up under one umbrella. Some may fall up under another umbrella. They may come together on a racial front, right? If there's an opposition to blacks in general, then of course, the blacks in general are going to respond. But it's not always so cut and dry. I saw situations in prison where Bloods and Crips from down south didn't mess with Bloods and Crips from the Sacramento area. And then I've seen other places on yards where they actually have a close relationship, right? The Bloods with the Bloods, the Crips with the Crips. So it kind of varies. If you're from the Bay Area, then odds are the Crip car is answering to somebody that you're probably not, and vice versa. And with the whites, it's some are broken up by county, right? Cocoa County Woods and Sacramaniacs and whatnot. Others are, organizations, NLRs, the brand, so certainly there's always the potential for somebody to pull up that has a wider reaching voice than others, and can maybe stretch across some of those lines. With the North and the South, it's pretty cut and dry in terms of that chain of command, right? The people that you plug in may change, but there is one authoritative voice for each side. And so it's kind of easier to talk about how those groups would deal with something than with the blacks and the whites, because those groups can sometimes have their own politics. But feel free in the comments, man, if you have some experience with this, or if you come from a perspective of one of the groups that I mentioned or a group that I didn't mention, and you got something to add to the conversation or some clarity, if you think I'm wrong, right, then feel free, obviously hop in the comments, man. This is a conversation, and I don't know everything, but this is from the best of my knowledge. I try not to get up here and just say stuff for the hell of saying it, right? When I say it, it's from an informed perspective, but informed doesn't mean knows absolutely everything. And so feel free to tap in, man. In the meantime, help others move in excellence. That's being a homie. Help yourselves at the same time. And you guys take care. Catch me on the next one.